Stay with me for one moment. I promise I will get to Elden Ring very soon. But I'm going to start with a short passage from Sigmund Freud's The Interpretation of Dreams. In it, Freud writes about a dream that he had. And I quote, "I had written a monograph on an unspecified genus of plants. A monograph is a sort of specialized book, typically revolving around one central scientific or scholarly concept. The book lay before me, and I was, at the moment, turning over a folded colored plate. Bound up in the copy there was a dried specimen of the plant." End quote. All in all, pretty ordinary as far as dreams go, but in pursuit of a broader thesis on dreams, Freud wanted to know how his mind conjured that dream. Why the monograph? Why the botany? Well, earlier that day, he had seen a book on a cyclamen, which is a kind of flower, in the window of a bookstore. There actually wasn't a cyclamen in his dream, but either way, we found one cause for the dream. Freud saw a monograph on botany during the day, and so during the night he dreamt that he wrote a monograph on botany. Easy enough. But that isn't quite enough to justify the entire dream itself. Freud proceeds to guide us down his train of thought, which leads him to a doctor friend of his who he had shared a conversation with the previous evening about something unrelated. Freud wrote a monograph on a particular drug earlier in his life, and that same doctor friend was very involved with Freud when he wrote that monograph. So there's linkage between this doctor friend and some kind of botanical monograph. Freud thinks this was the, quote, active instigator, end quote, of the dream. He had the conversation with the doctor, which is strongly associated with some kind of monograph on botany. But his chain of thoughts continues even further. The botanical nature of his dream also seems related to another friend who he had met the previous day, a man named Professor Gartner, which etymologically comes from gardener. When he met him, he complimented his wife on her, quote, blooming looks. I am not familiar enough with the 1890s to know if that is as weird a quote-unquote compliment as it would be today, but knowing Freud, I simply have to assume it is. That same day, he had also told a story to other separate individuals about flowers. So now we have gardener, blooming, and flowers that all lead us to biology and plants vaguely. Freud goes on for some time in this vein and follows various trains of thought all the way to his childhood, when he began his love of books to help explain the presence of books in his dream. Freud says that the concepts of botanical and monograph both entered the dream because they constitute what he calls nodal points upon which a lot of his dream thoughts converged. Basically, all of these causes and experiences and ideas rolled up together to land on the concept of botanical and monograph to present that dream. He then says, quote, "Each of the elements of the dream's content turns out to have been overdetermined, to have been represented in the dream thoughts many times over. In other words, each singular part of the dream has many different causes. The botanical element of the dream was linked to the book he saw on cyclamen, and his conversation with his doctor friend and Professor Gartner, and his wife's, quote, blooming looks, and so on. And this is important, each singular case is enough on its own to fully explain the dream, or mostly fully explain the dream. The book on cyclamen that Freud had seen earlier that day could probably fully suffice to explain that dream. But there are many other causes that also explain Freud's dream, all the way down to his childhood love of books. Dreams are overdetermined. They are overflowing with causes and meanings, and they can't be reduced to one cause or input. You can't just say the dream was caused by one thing, because then you would lose sight of the entire dream itself. It is both more and less than the sum of its individual parts. Elden Ring is both dreamlike and overdetermined in much the same way. A lot of Elden Ring's individual themes are overdetermined in the sense that each theme is packed with just too many symbols, too many motifs, too many component themes, in the same way that Freud's dream was packed with too many causes. Elden Ring has a general theme of motherhood and giving birth, for instance. But that theme has its own component themes of unwanted children, a fully unwanted self, mothers reduced to dumb vessels for reproduction, women abandoning their own flesh, a mother offering her own blood to her followers, matriarchy, deifying those who give birth, the miracle of childbirth, men wanting desperately to be mothers, children becoming their own mother, I think, and more. Any one of these component themes alone, I think, is enough to say something like this game is interested in exploring a theme of motherhood. The issue is that there are 9 of those component themes of motherhood, and they don't perfectly align with one another. The theme of motherhood in Elden Ring is overdetermined. And Elden Ring is about more than motherhood. It is about cycles of decay. It is about cycles of empire. It is about powerlessness. It is about the hubris of lusting for power. It is about grief. It is about revenge, and much more. Elden Ring the game is itself overdetermined. If you say Elden Ring is about motherhood, you are ignoring large swaths of the game because it is about much more than that. And that to me is just really fun. Elden Ring just throws a bunch of ideas and themes at you and lets your pattern-seeking brain figure out what it's trying to say. I just think it's really fun to turn those ideas over in my head. So that is how I think I want to frame this playthrough. It will be lightly edited, it will probably be very long, and I probably won't quote Freud again, although I don't promise anything. I hope to just spend a very long time frolicking in the details and getting lost in the weeds and all of the themes and all the sub-themes. I don't intend on emerging with the super clear and short and pithy thesis statement, this is what Elden Ring is all about. I hope to end with nothing more than a renewed appreciation for the game and all the things it is trying to say. I'm also not going to get into a debate about the narrative truth and Miyazaki's intent because that's just not fun to me. Instead, I will offer my own interpretations, try and ground those interpretations in the game itself, and have fun doing it. Each one of these episodes will end with a boss fight, and some will be longer than others, and some will be shorter, and that's fine. I'll also try and tie some of the game's themes into a longer analysis of each individual boss at the end of each episode. And one quick note before we begin, I'm going forward on the assumption that everyone watching has seen both of the story trailers. They contain vital information to the game. I really wish they were present in the game itself. If you haven't seen them, they're linked below. Alright, let's get started. Last thing before I hit new game here, I just wanted to point out that if you were completely new to this franchise, had only ever seen the name Elden Ring, you could reasonably expect to see the logo of the game, which is just a circle, right? A ring in sort of the same vein that Lord of the Rings is, right? But when you open up the game, you see the actual logo of the game, and it more closely resembles an anchor than it does a ring, which I'm not fully sure what to make of that. In particular, there's like 3 overlapping circles, or 4 or 5 overlapping circles in the middle of it, with a trellis behind it, and the like anchor holding it all together with America's symbol along the top. Again, not really a ton to comment on here, except for the fact that this is only the first example of Elden Ring giving you text and giving you a visual, and not letting the text and the visual like fully 100% reflect one another, which is the rest of the entire game, I think. But I have said far too much, so I'm going to click this new game button. I always get a little excited when I click it. Full disclosure, I've done this recording once before. I had to stop the first time for some lag related reason. This character is going to be a thief. In my headcanon, in my headcanon, this character is somebody who has been sort of a a thief who was low on the totem pole, who heard tale of some dragon communion and lusting for its power, ventured to the lands between to seek it out. Really, this is going to be a dragon themed build, because all of the dragon stuff scales with arcane, and arcane is the stat that controls your item discovery. And we want people to drop lots of items so that we can read item descriptions, which is where the entire story of this game takes place. So we are starting bandit. I think I said thief just a second ago. I'm going to say that we are a dragon pilgrim. In my headcanon, this is an older person. And then here in this character creation scene, we've got our first lore descriptions to read. So let's get into it. We've got 10 characters here. Some of them have some interesting stuff, some of them don't. Vagabond doesn't really. A knight exiled from their homeland to wander. A solid armor-clad origin. Just communicating that, if you're maybe new to the game, this is a solid starting class, because it is. But as far as the flavor text, not a ton to comment on there. A nomad warrior who fights wielding 2 blades at once. An origin of exceptional technique. There's a lot of water imagery in the costume design here, which we will cover at a later date. Otherwise, not a ton to talk about there. Hero, a stalwart hero at home with the battle axe, descended from a Badlands chieftain. Not much more to comment on there. Bandit, a dangerous bandit who strikes for weak points, excels at ranged combat with bows. Again, just sort of presenting the gameplay here. Not a ton to comment on. Astrologer, a scholar who reads fate in the stars, heir to the school of glintstone sorcery. Now there is something to talk about here. There's several things to talk about here. One of which is this isn't a scholar to the school or a student of the school of glintstone sorcery. This is the heir of the school of glintstone sorcery, which conjures images of family trees and royalty and bloodlines and all of that, which is suggestive, I think, of the fact that in this world, scholarship and nobility are one and the same, right? Only the regal noble few are the ones who are literate, right? The other big thing to talk about here is the scholar who reads fate in the stars. So we're reading, I don't know, a million ways you can interpret this, right? You're reading the stars and discerning what fate will hold, or you are somehow literally reading fate out of the constellations that are being presented to you. A really, I think, fascinating idea that we will discuss in much greater depth later on. Here we have another class with an interesting description, which is a seer ostracized for inauspicious prophecies, well versed in healing incantations. Funny that this person is described as a seer when they very clearly have a blindfold on. This is a theme in a lot of FromSoft's games where the blindfold, those without quote unquote physical tangible eyesight, have some sort of deeper sight, some deeper understanding of the world that is around them, which then has the implication that the world that we can see with our physical eyes is not the full story. There is some sort of deeper cosmic truth, deeper, sometimes even a deeper eldritch truth that you can only see by, in Bloodborne's case, attaching a bunch of eyes to various parts of your body. But here it seems to be removing your physical sight completely, which begs some questions about how is this person interacting with the world around them. There's also the fun little thing of there's a bell attached to this person, the other big feature of this design, which just like warns people that they're coming, I guess, which is funny. So you can imagine like some community of people that hear the bell and like run screaming because this person who has had these prophecies is coming. And surely we cannot hear these prophecies. Also shows us here that there are such a thing as prophecies, right? Which again has a lot of follow-up questions related with that. Like, what are these prophecies? Real? I mean, with the description of the astrologer, we would think so, but there is, I think, in these sorts of games, always the chance that in sort of a trickster genie type way, the prophecies are always self-fulfilling and they will only come true to someone who hears them, right? Sort of lending more credence to that bell. And then the other thing here is that astrologers are interested in scaling off of intelligence, and prophets are interested in scaling off of faith. They are almost the like mirror opposites: 16 intelligence, 7th faith, and then the opposite here. Both intelligence and faith seem to have some like connection with the like magic of this world. I think it is a theme. I think it is a theme in the greater like Dark Souls universe, which is the game series that comes before, and this is a spiritual successor to that. Intelligence and faith are two roads leading to the same sort of path. They are two sides of the same coin. I guess that's more of a Demon Souls trope, which is an earlier game. But I'm getting too far down the rabbit hole here. Samurai, a capable fighter from the distant land of reeds, handy with katana and longbows. Not a ton to comment on here. Land of Reeds, obviously the like Japan analog for this game, which tells us that there is a world outside of the lands between, which is interesting because, as we will discover, the Elden Ring seems to carry this like metaphysical sense of structure to the lands between. Like, if you shatter the Elden Ring, you shatter the world itself. So it's a little interesting to like turn around in your head. Is there an equivalent of that to the Land of Reeds? And if so, what is it? We don't get a ton of information on the Land of Reeds because we're not playing a game set in the Land of Reeds, right? But I think interesting nonetheless. Prisoner, a prisoner bound in an iron mask, studied in glintstone sorcery, having lived among the elite prior to sentencing. Really interesting phrasing, lived among the elite. Not an elite themselves, perhaps a tutor who taught someone like the wrong thing, or taught like a regal, prince some like forbidden sorcery, right? I think this description more than any others gives you the seeds to plant a lot of different like role-playing narratives that you can have in your mind as you play this game, which I think is really neat, and also bears more credence to the idea that sorcery is something that is only available to royalty, right? Confessor, a church spy, adept at covert operations, equally adept with a sword as they are with their incantations. I think this is a really interesting concept just on its own. The fact that a church has like spies hunting out blasphemy, hunting out, maybe those, blurting out prophecies that could be harmful to the church itself. With this, you also get the sense that we are living in a sort of world where the church itself is an institution with a power equal to or greater than the power of the state, right? That the church itself can like hire and has a whole, I was going to say department, but that's not the word I want. A whole, group of people who this is their job, right? So the church has attained some sort of monopoly over violence in much the same way that a state typically does. And then finally, a wretch, a poor, purposeless sod, naked as the day they were born. A nice club is all they have. And this is just, I think, a funny description. I don't think there's anything else to really talk about there. If you're starting the game fresh, I always recommend starting as a wretch because this is a very blank slate character. But we're starting as a bandit to get that high arcane right off the bat. The keepsake, all of these items with the exception of the lands between room, you find as you play the game, so I won't go through them now. I'm going to click the cracked pot here in a second. But the Lands Between rune, the gold of grace is shining in the eyes of the people of the Lands Between, used to gain many runes. This is a way to like start with some levels. Introduces the connection between grace, leveling up, so like strength in the world of the game, and eyes. Right, we've seen this already with the prophet who has their eyes covered up. There is something special about eyes, the like color of your eyes, and the fact that there is something called grace with a particular color here, gold, that resides in your eyes, literally tinting the world around you, right? Which is a concept I think that we will expand on in much greater detail later on. The base template here, this is a tradition among From Software games, that the base template gives you lore that you can't find anywhere else in the game, and that is in fact like crazy. Like there is no connection to anything else in the game here. There is something interesting in all of these, and I'll go through them one by one here again. Warrior, the most common face among the Tarnished. After all, they were all warriors once. Lets us know that we are something called Tarnished. So that's, step one. And that all Tarnished were warriors once. So all the Tarnished were perhaps part of an army. All Tarnished have a sense of, maybe nationhood is too strong a word for it, but like some sense of tribalism or community at the very, very least. But presumably you could imagine that all Tarnished were part of the same army, as well as we will learn later, who get exiled from the Lands Between. Truth Seeker, the face of an austere pilgrim. There are many roads to truth. This introduces one of the most or I think everything is interesting. This introduces a theme of the game that I think you can read this two ways, right? You can read the fact that there is some external truth, like external to us, a truth that lives without our perception, right? Like if I leave a room, there is some like truth about the room that stays true when I am not perceiving it, and that everybody is taking their own little road to that external truth. But because of the fact that it is external to our own perception, our own biases, they will all find their way there eventually. But I also think you can make the exact opposite interpretation here, which is that there is no such thing as an external truth. Truth is only in the eye of the beholder, and everybody is taking their own separate road away from each other to this like mystical thing that they see in the distance that they are labeling truth. One man's truth is another man's lie. And I think both of those things are themes that the game will continue to expound on. I'm saying that a lot, but we haven't started the game in earnest yet. Aristocrat, a regal face found among those who claim noble blood in the Lands Between. Again, we are introducing the theme of like there is some sort of like class hierarchy here, some sort of class structure, and I don't really think there's anything else to say here. Loner, face found among a proud and seclusive tribe of folk well versed in ancient legends and heresies alike. Like a major contradiction here, which is this is the base template. I'm calling them races, but that's not quite. I don't even think that's what the game wants us to do. So I'll just say the template here. This person is called a loner, but so far these are the only, or among the four that we've seen so far, only two have been confirmed to be part of a community, and this is one of them, right? Which is at least a little interesting. But this person's peoples are seclusive, so there we get the like loner idea. And then we also get the idea that there is such a thing as ancient legend and also heresy. And I think there's a relatively straightforward implication here, which is that both of those things, that's a like eye of the beholder thing, right? Like one man's legend is another man's heresy. Northerner, a face found among the hardy people of the unforgiving north. Some say they're descended from giants. This introduces the I'm going to use this word and then define it. The epistemological uncertainty that the game is presenting us, right? Epistemology is the like, I think technically it's the study of knowledge, but it's the way that we know what we know, right? It's the processes by which we gain our own knowledge, right? The process by which here we are getting our knowledge is reading this item description. But this item description is introducing like an unreliable narrator, perhaps, or some uncertainty at the very least, which is that it's not telling us the truth, it's telling us what some people think the truth is. And do we think that we should trust the, like, quote, some say when we see them? Why would the text be there if we should just 100% flatly trust it, right? If that were the case, the description would just be a face found among the hardy people of the unforgiving north. They're descended from giants. I personally am not quite sure where I land on this. A lot of people argue about it. I think it's just whatever is most interesting at any given time, or, most fun to interpret. Here, I think the ambiguity is part of the point, whether or not this person is or isn't descended from giants. The idea that they are descended from giants is perhaps more important than anything than the real world, right? So we're getting the sense that narratives and rumors become more important than what is real. Seafarer, the face of one who wanders the seas in search of their home and the lands between. Not a ton to comment on here. Elden Ring is really has a ton of water themes, and this is, I think, introducing the concept, but there's not a ton to comment on there, I don't think. Reedlander, we're already familiar with the Land of Reeds, but now we know that blood is a familiar sight there, so, that's just on its face, it is a, conflict-ridden country, I suppose, but, we can't infer much more than that at this point. These three next ones are crazy, I think, given the context of everything I know about all the item descriptions that I've read. I'm no expert, trust me, but these are outside of the realm of a lot of everything else that the game presents us. Draconian, the stony face of the people of the ancient dragons, among whom life is typically short. Just a ton to talk about here, right? We learned in the game, this isn't a bit of a spoiler, that dragons can turn into people, right? So, and they assume a certain form when they do, and that form is pretty dragon-like. You can look at that person and be like, you're a dragon. This person is not that. This person is very clearly a human, right? So maybe we can assume that this isn't a dragon turned human. This is a human that was among the ancient dragons, right? So were they subservient to the ancient dragons? Were they living alongside them? Probably not. Probably they were not ruling over the ancient dragons on just everything we know to be true about dragons. And then we get among whom life is typically short, which I think you can read as a joke, these people are subservient to the dragons, and the dragons eat them, and that's why their life is short. But in a game that is also interested in, like I've talked about before, motherhood, if your lifespan is short, that puts more emphasis on the ways in which more lives are made, right? Speaking of lives being made, the stony face of the people of the ancient dragons. We know that ancient dragons. This is another bit of a spoiler. I'm gonna generally try and stay away from, content that we haven't already discovered, but here I think is relevant. Dragons turn into full-on stone when they die. This is a theme that is also prevalent within Dark Souls 1, where dragons are quite literally stone. So the stony face of the people of the ancient dragons, I think, gives some idea that these people, maybe quite literally, might be made out of stone. We see the creation of life in a bunch of different ways throughout this game, and I don't think it's crazy to imagine that dragons were making people out of stone. And we'll talk more about that in the future. Nightfolk, the features of those known as Nightfolk, few in number. They were said to bleed silver long ago. To my knowledge, the word Nightfolk isn't present anywhere else in the game. So this is all we get of that people, and we know that they're bleeding silver. So where the grace of gold is said to inhabit certain individuals' eyes. Here we get some sort of the opposite of that, which is, gold and silver. There's a very deep alchemical rabbit hole you can dive into if you so desire with Elden Ring here. And this is the very tip of the iceberg. But again, like the dragonfolk, among whom life is typically short, these are few in number, and again, we're said, so we're not sure if this is reliable information. They were bleeding silver, and again, long ago, so there's some sort of legend or myth here. And then last but not least, Numen. The face of the Numen, supposed descendants of denizens of another world. Long lived, but seldom born. Again, we get that seldom born idea. I suppose Draconians are, if their life is short, presumably they're often born, and so I guess we get the corollary of that, which is that they are long lived but seldom born. We will talk more about supposed descendants of denizens of another world. A lot to unpack there, I think. Again, though, here we have introducing this theme of motherhood and new life. A fun thing about Elden Ring's character creator is that you don't have to think too much about it, because your character's probably going to have a helmet on anyways. And there is an easy way to change your appearance. So I kind of like I think I like the blondie here. Maybe I want the... Really, I'm picking a hairstyle. What does that look like? Let's do the seafarer. We can do the detailing later. So let's start the game. A cutscene is going to play. I'm going to shut up. There's so much to unpack with this cutscene that I'm just not going to attempt it. And that's just a problem for later me. So sit back and enjoy.
The fallen leaves tell a story. The great Elden Ring was shattered. In our home, across the fog, the lands between. Now, Queen Marika the Eternal is nowhere to be found. And in the night of the Black Knives, Godwyn the Golden was first to perish. Soon, Marika's offspring, demigods all, claimed the shards of the Elden Ring. The mad taint of their newfound strength triggered the shattering. A war from which no lord arose. A war leading to abandonment by the greater will. Oh, rise now, ye tarnished, ye dead who yet live. The call of long-lost grace speaks to us all. Horalu, chieftain of the Badlands, the ever-brilliant Gold Mask. Fear the deathbed companion, the loathsome dung-eater, and Sir Gideon Ofnir, the all-knowing. And one other, whom grace would again bless, a tarnished of no renown. Cross the fog to the lands between, to stand before the Elden Ring and become the Elden Lord.
Okay, like I said, much to unpack there, but I'm going to try and take piece by piece as it becomes relevant to the story, right? But for now, I'm just gonna, start playing through the game. So I get 2 emotes here because I pre-ordered the game and the DLC. But here we are. We arrive at a sort of dilapidated chapel that was worshipping this woman here who was holding out her hand to her, presumably followers. And there are a lot of textures and assets in this game that I don't think you should read too closely into. But I mean, at the very minimum, the bookshelves here imply that this group of people is like scholarly, literate at the very least, but interested in learning to some extent. But this chapel has been abandoned for quite a while. The roof is literally falling apart. Yeah. There's one item to get and a message to read. These bloodstains are people who are coming here later and killing themselves, so it looks like the maiden here is bleeding out, which is just a fun thing the community does. But the message here: though the path be broken and uncertain, claim your place as Elden Lord. These messages have a lot of, like, this one is a person. You can sort of pretty clearly know which ones were like developer written and which ones were not. This one was. So we get that, and then on this dead body we get the tarnished wizened finger. The inventory with the DLC update gives us a like recent items menu, which really inspired this lore through, because it shows you all the items and gives you a little exclamation point if you haven't seen them yet. It probably goes without saying, but of course we are reading all of the item descriptions here. Item for online play. Used to write messages, your messages will be conveyed to other worlds, allowing other players to read them. A finger of corpse wax, so emaciated the bone is visible. It is a relic of those who came before, left to help those who would come after. Just looking at it, we can see the finger is turning silver, almost like into stone. Implications abound there, of course. It looks nasty to look at. But it also looks like severed in a way that is intentional, like surgically removed, based on the apparatus that it is attached to. So we get the pretty, I think, clear story here of someone murdered this maiden, left the message with the finger, and then threw the finger on the maiden. There's a number of ways you can read it, but I think that's the clearest. You could also assume that the maiden wrote it in in her dying breath, which I think is also kind of fun. In that interpretation, I think that we're meant to imply that we removed the finger from her corpse. And besides how gross that is, she does have all 10 fingers. So, the only other thing I'm going to comment on, how pretty I think this game is quite a bit. Starting here, I love the dark interior with just the glimmer of the shining golden light from the outside through that one window here. But let's get into it. So we can see the Erd tree, which you can readily assume is an object of faith, just like fully in our field of vision here. With I believe they're called God rays, the rays of light coming down that typically come from a sun. So we can, I think, readily assume that the Erd tree is acting as a sort of sun in this world. The chapel itself also has a tree design on the doors. I think both sides, right? Yeah. So we immediately get the sense that there is a tree religion, right, of whom this person is a member, and you can very, very clearly see why, right? It's pretty big. I think I don't want to let this moment go by without at least pointing out that it doesn't look real, right? It is like glowing gold, a little translucent, and if you look up above, you can see some of the branches that do look tangible, and some that fully don't, right? And we'll see that much later on in the game, I think, more clearly, but I think that's something to at least think about for now. Again, much to discuss there that we'll get into. Just from playing this game, I know that there's not anything around here. But we immediately get a sense that this chapel is way up high above the water here, in a way that looks fully unnatural, right? This terrain looks very similar to, I'm forgetting the word, some sort of basalt formation that happens after a volcanic eruption. And there is a volcano, which we can not see from here. Can we see it from here? Not really, not at this time of day. But there is a volcano on the other side of the map. But again, the terrain here looks jagged and deformed, and we know that when America smashed the Elden Ring, shattered the Elden Ring, perhaps we get the sense that the actual world has been shattered along with it. If there is a word you could use to describe this terrain, I think it would pretty easily be shattered, right? But funnily enough, a bunch of people here jumping off. So if I click a bloodstain, you can see someone new to the game make a decision to jump off and die. These bloodstains are perfect comedy. From Software's venture into making a comedic game. Not a ton more to talk about here. We'll explore. We've been down here. We'll explore every little nook and cranny. I think there is. Oh yes, there's an old flag here. Look, almost a battle banner, right? That shows a beast of a lion. Sort of hard to make out. Yes, a lion or a big cat, and then also the giant statue of a person with that sort of semicircle on their helmet, wielding a spear with roots growing up around them. The roots, I think you could argue, either were added later or originally they seem to be a different kind of texture. But from this vantage point, they don't look organic. So I think you can safely assume that, with this like tree imagery that we have confirmed that this chapel is a part of, that there is some sort of like nature worship here, maybe. So then as we come across this bridge, we can see some more statues of a sort of saint wielding a sword. This one with his or her head cut off. Typically that means that typically that show tells a story of a statue with their head cut off. What was formerly an object of faith becomes an object of heresy, and so the head's got to go. But I think in this case it's just meant to imply this is an old place because the other statues here with head aloft, and then we also get this weird ornamentation of, it's kind of hard to make out, but it is a woman holding out a pitcher of some kind, Pitcher, anointing those who walk through this archway here. I'll do a lap around here. Well, this is one of the areas where you would think that there is like something down here, but there's not. Certainly suggestive of a like dungeon underneath of it. Yeah. So let's go through here. We can see America in a stance very similar to the one that we saw from her in the opening slideshow. So we get that this is a like fundamental to her character, right? I've heard before that this may be like her trying to imitate a tree, right? Like holding her hands out as branches. I'm not sure if I quite buy that, but I think that is a reasonable interpretation given everything we know about, like just the evidence that we've been presented with so far. And then some more statues here along the side. There's a boss that's about to jump out, so I'm just going to take another look at the details here, see if there's anything to comment on. Not really. Looking at the chapel from this vantage, again, we get the sense that this is an island fully disconnected from the mainland. And I think we're reasonably meant to assume that this happened post-construction, right? Like this chapel was built, and then something happened to the geology of this world such that it was cut off from everything else. Maybe there was a bridge that collapsed, leading to the mainland there. I think I've said everything I want to, or at least I've pointed out everything I want to comment on here. Some pretty strong art direction here. Lots of golds, lots of flowers. Here we get the Grafted Scion, our first boss of the series. This is a boss that you're meant to die to. That I've never actually killed in one go by my little baby self. And I don't think I'm going to either. He doesn't give you a lot of openings here. I'm an alright PvEer. Nothing exceptional. I'm not gonna like no-hit the game. You can see the hand. Oops, I think I just died. Yep. You can see the hand pulling the cloak down. But I'll shut up while the cutscene plays. I think that was us falling into water of some kind.
Don't worry, Torrent. Fortune is on his side.
Note the burn scars on the hand there.
We found him here, after all. One of his kind is sure to seek the Elden Ring. Even if it does violate the Golden Order.
So I think that's meant to imply that we are fortunate to have washed up here, right? Meaning that a bunch of other people don't wash up here and are presumably grabbed by the Grafted Scion, I think, pretty clearly for grafting of some kind, which I'll talk about in a moment. But I think also note that the lady fully did not help us. I think that's where we're going to end it for here. I have a lot of thoughts about the Grafted Scion, and here they are. Alright, let's start with the name Grafted Scion. This is immediately evocative of a gardening practice called grafting, where you more or less tape one plant to another plant, and it just kind of works. The plants grow into one another and they become one plant. This is one of those fun little facts about the world that just seems insane when you first hear about it, because it sort of seems like how biology might work if a 10-year-old was in charge of the laws of physics. Like, I should be able to stick one plant onto a different plant to make a new one. But I digress. I won't get too much into the weeds on the actual mechanics of it, because it is far beyond the scope of the video, and also I have no idea how it works. Except, I will note that the lower part of the plant, the part of the plant that is being grafted onto, is called the understock, and the upper part of the plant, the part of the plant that is being attached, is called the scion. So I think this boss, called the Grafted Scion, is clearly supposed to be suggestive of this real-world practice of grafting. So then, what part of the boss is the understock, and what part is the scion? Well, the cloak covering up the body makes it difficult to see, but there is what looks like a troll's torso anchoring everything else. My interpretation is that first a troll was brutally mutilated, and like a parasite, the child's face and arm were grafted onto the troll. The once frail child found new strength with the troll's body and initiated a grim collection of limbs gathered from slain enemies. The Grafted Scion that we see today is living proof of its own brutality. So in this interpretation, the troll is the understock, and the child and all the limbs afterward are the scion. Given the golden circlet on the child and the expensive cloak thrown over the bulging mass of body horror, the double meaning of scion makes itself abundantly clear. This person is literally a scion of a royal family. Here, scion means offspring or descendant. The game begins to take the phrase family tree to a more literal place. The cloak is by far the most interesting part of the design here to me. It is finely wrought, signaling wealth, if not extravagant wealth. But here it is thrown haphazardly over the writhing mass of body parts, as if the scion is clinging to one last vestige of the comfortable royal life. The cloak covering up nearly its entire body also suggests it might be almost ashamed of itself. Ashamed of its ugliness, perhaps. Or ashamed of the history that its entire body of stolen limbs conveys. Indeed, when it does its scream attack, the cloak gets disheveled, and the Scion pulls it back into place over the heap of limbs that it has grafted onto itself. So, this Scion is very literally subsuming the strength of its subjects to make itself stronger in one of the most horrific ways possible. And perhaps it is trying to sweep that foul act under the rug, or cloak, as it were. We perhaps get a hint of naked ambition, someone exploiting their regal position for power at any cost. Of course, the Scion itself appears to be a child, so perhaps the grafting was some painful ritual that was inflicted upon them. On the other hand, though, appearances can be deceiving, and this game is no stranger to hiding sinister personas behind a child's face. So perhaps this is just a super evil kid. Or more likely, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Perhaps this child saw a path to power that involved sacrificing the bodies of those forgotten multitudes far beneath them, and didn't stop to consider that this monstrous act was in fact, literally, turning them into a monster. I mean, running full speed ahead to get what you want, without considering the lives of others or the long-term consequences to yourself, is a very childlike thing to do. And the weight of those unfortunate souls who were grafted will literally follow this person around for the rest of their miserable existence. So, the real boss isn't the horrible mass of stitched together limbs. The boss or monster that we are fighting is the fair face of the child that we see plainly in front of us. After all, we're not fighting the grafted understock. We are fighting the grafted Scion. Curiously, this Scion has grafted more than just quote-unquote normal body parts. There is a wing in place of a normal arm that the concept art makes quite clear. To my knowledge, we don't see a wing like that anywhere else in the game, but it's a very loud flash of color that is complemented by the peacock-like cloak. Both the wing and the peacock cloak seem flashy, in a way that is at the least designed to grab your attention, and perhaps even designed to gloat or show off. Grafting is surely an act reserved for the privileged few. After all, the victim to beneficiary ratio of grafting is quite high. Perhaps the Scion is trying to overcorrect for their own frailness or weakness, and grafted the otherwise useless wing as a show of strength, or even a last-ditch attempt at finery. After all, why wear a feathered cloak when you can literally have a wing? It's a bit of a stretch, but I wonder if it also recalls the myth of Icarus. Here, the Scion is attaching wings to itself to achieve some greater height without slowing to consider consequences. Again, a bit of a stretch. At any rate, just from looking at it, I think we're meant to assume that this boss is trying to graft us. I don't know what to make of the fact that when it kills us, or knocks us out, I suppose, we apparently go flying from the hit into the ocean to wash up in a strange cave. At least I think that is what the game is trying to have us believe, though I think it could have communicated that a smidge better. Anyways, the Grafted Scion's presence does recontextualize the entire beginning of the game. We awake in a chapel, completely new to the world, our only potential friend, bloody, on the floor. Just one message serves to guide us. Though the path be broken and uncertain, claim your place as Elden Lord. And yet, our path leads us directly and immediately to a creature who has already claimed their place as nobility, and is looking for more unsuspecting limbs. Even now, all it has is not enough. It is never enough. I mean, talk about overdetermined. Each move this creature makes seems to be overflowing with all the memories of the countless souls sacrificed on the altar of hubristic power. There are limbs grafted onto limbs grafted onto limbs here, Arms that once were a scion become an understock as another arm is fitted onto the first. The scion is caught in a recursive cycle of grafting. Even now, some appendages are 4 or 5 limbs long. And it's still not enough. Finally, I need to at least mention that Elden Ring seems to think that our physical flesh, our physical body, has some sort of power inherent to it. The Grafted Scion steals power for itself by stealing bodies. Even without any soul to animate them, those bodies still seem to be inherently powerful themselves. A body, no matter how disfigured, will always have immense potential. This scion, through one of the most horrible crimes imaginable, reduces its victims all the way down to nothing but their body, so it can steal that body, and own that body, and profit from all the work that those bodies did.